Welcome to Straight Up Now Tell Me, Christian conversation that's straight without a chaser. And so we find ourselves in what most people deem to be the most wonderful time of year, until it's not. And so we certainly know that things do fall apart at Christmas time sometimes. So whether it be that we may have been, slated to be the lead vocalist or maybe a soloist in the local municipal Christmas celebration, or maybe even at church, and we've recently found out that that will no longer be the case. Or maybe it's something that's going on in the workplace where we were expecting to have the vacation schedule fall in our favor, or maybe we were expecting to get a Christmas bonus or a Christmas raise at the end of the year, or maybe we work in the contracting world and we have recently found out that our contract may not be renewed in the new year. Whatever the case, we certainly know that things can fall apart in that regard as well. But I dare say that there is no place like home, and that we certainly know, if at no other place, that things can certainly fall apart at home during Christmas time. So whether it be a situation where, hey, I dare say that there's a decision that has to be made, or there's controversy around, who will host Christmas dinner this year. Or maybe it's a controversy around, which side of the family that you will actually spend Christmas with, if you have to, have two sides of the family that you have to choose between. Or maybe it could be something along the lines of actually who's in and who's out as it relates to Christmas dinner. So we certainly know that things can fall apart around that and around some big topics. And if there's been a divorce per se in the family, so there's a lot of decisions that have to be made and upheld regarding possibly who the children will actually spend Christmas with on this year. And there's a situation where promises can be broken, and so things can fall apart in that regard. And so those things can be major throughout the holiday season. But there can also be, smaller controversies around holiday traditions and whether or not someone is actually following the traditions that we want them to follow at this time, or even, hey, around who might be making the mac and cheese this year, or the figgy pudding, as we might say. And so we know that things can get complicated at Christmas time around all of these things, and that things can certainly fall apart in what used to feel we used to consider the most wonderful time of year starts feeling a little less wonderful and a little more complicated. And it really starts feeling like it really is not the most wonderful time of year. So what do we do about all of that? And so the question is, how do we figure out how to navigate this thing we call Christmas time when things fall apart? And so what I would dare say is that the number one thing that we can do is to live at peace with everyone as much as it depends on us. And so scripture says, as much as it depends on us, to live at peace with everyone. But that in itself, it gets real complicated at times. And so I guess the question might become, what if it's not me who's, bringing the ruckus? What if it's someone else who's really, being disagreeable, and as much as I'm trying to live at peace with them, then, what if they are just the ones who are causing all the controversy, who will not be quieted at this time of year? So if that's the case, then quite honestly, we have some decisions to make. And so one option would be to possibly gather up the kids and exit the building, right? So there's always a choice. And so, but there's also the option of really, giving people a piece, a P-I-E-C-E, of our minds, instead of really going after peace, P-E-A-C-E. And so those are all options and choices that we could make. But I would dare say that the number one choice that we should make in this situation is really to invite God in and let him, and allow him to help us with our decision making and help us in the situation. And so I say that because, God is a lot smarter than all of us, and he knows how to navigate the terrain of all these situations a lot better than we do. So we have some choices to make. And again, the number one choice is to invite God in and to allow him to help us navigate the situation and really our response to the situation, and to help us with our decision making is what I'm trying to say. And also to seek to live at peace with everyone. And so I know that can be complicated, and it in and of itself can be a challenge to do. And I get it, and I'm not trying to oversimplify any of that, but life with God is certainly a lot better than life without Him. And God knows a lot more than you and I. And He has what I say is an aerial view of the situation. And so He can help us navigate the terrain a lot better than we can navigate it in and of ourselves, is what I'm trying to say. So just, something to consider, and certainly the best advice that, we can offer here from Straight Up Now Tell Me to all of us during this holiday season. But you might ask, okay, Patrice, it sounds wonderful, to do these things. And I'm not saying that it's easy. And so what I will share is that there was a time, and just that I really was seeking to really to live at peace with everyone. And, I had really asked God, how can I get this done? And so there was a situation in the workplace where I actually worked for someone who was above my head. And the situation was, it was like going to work every day and really feeling like someone was pulling your hair, like would happen in third grade. Someone sitting behind you pulling your hair. And so I'm like, okay, God, how do we navigate this space? And so, I have to report to work. That's a thing that most of us have to do. But I'm like, God, how do we, navigate, and how do we get past this? And so God shared with me two things. And God said, no matter what, you be kind, and no matter what, don't quit. And so I have to be honest with you guys, and had to be honest with God in that very moment. It's like in that, God, I don't want to do either one of those things. I don't want to be nice, and I don't want to be kind, and I certainly don't want to not quit. I said, because this is insane. And it's a situation where I felt that, the situation was unjust. And I also felt that, God's reply to me was slightly unjust. And so, but I decided, what, God, I am going to take you up on what you're saying. I am going to be kind, and I'm not going to exit, the building, so to speak. But what I found in that situation is that God actually knows a lot more than you and I. And so, certainly a lot more than me in that situation. So months later, when I actually applied for a new job, someone who I worked for previously relayed to me. They said the reason why they were so eager to give me the job is because that every memory that they had of me was pleasant. And so I didn't miss the fact that, that being kind and not letting someone, motivate us to exit that strategy, played out in a way that I didn't expect it to play out months later, when I was actually looking for another job. And the person who I worked with previously told me that every memory that they had of me was pleasant. And so that helped me get to the next thing. And I'm sure God knew it would. And then the other thing that I'll share real quickly is that, had I quit around the November timeframe, like I wanted to, like I felt like, quitting, that I would have run dead smack into the middle of COVID-19, the COVID-19 crisis. And I would have had been out of work leading up to COVID-19, possibly months before I needed to be. And I would have been positioned where I could not play a part and actually receive the benefits that I did receive by not leaving, early on. And so it positioned me well. And so I think I want to just reiterate that, God knows a lot more than we know, and He has an aerial view of what's coming down the line. And so if we trust Him and just take Him up and invite Him in to our decision making, and allow into the, our situations and our choices that we're making, our decision making, I'll say again, then a lot of times, all the time, life will end up a lot better than what we know, what we can, what we can see cause to happen on our own, is what I'm trying to say. So I just wanted to share that with you. But again, you might ask, like, Patrice, okay, so if things have fallen apart during the holiday season, and if this wonderful time of year is not as wonderful as we had hoped that it would be, so how do we go about doing what you're suggesting? How do we go about, allowing God into the situation? How and into our decision making? How do we go about, living at peace with everyone in this situation? And so I wanted to share a couple of things along those lines as well, and to actually say that the number one thing, if we are caught in the moment, and so if we don't have time to prepare and we are facing a situation where, someone is bringing the ruckus or something has gone awry in a situation, the number one thing that we can do is simply to use an acronym that Dr. Charles Stanley used to share with us often in one of his broadcasts. And that acronym is simply to halt. So, and the meaning behind that is that if we find ourselves in a difficult situation, then the number one thing that we can do is to not make any major choices or make any major moves when we're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Because we're not going to be in a situation to make the best choice in those situations. So we should halt and really give us a moment to actually, invite God in that situation, or really give us a moment to cool down so we can, think to even invite God in, and to really give a better response than what we would give without this situation. So if we find ourselves in a difficult situation, then what we're saying is to actually halt, not to make any major choices, make any major moves, even at Christmas time, at Christmas dinner time, at any time. If we're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, pause for a second to give yourself a moment to collect yourself, give yourself a moment to allow God to speak to you, and then, and go from there. So that's one strategy that I wanted to offer up today. So please just halt and don't make any major decisions. But the other thing that I want to say is that if we have an opportunity to really invite God in, and so if we're not caught in the actual moment of what is going on, and so we can prepare ahead of time. And so what I'll say about that is that if we know that we're going to be faced with a situation, if we know that we have a family member that's actually struggling with alcoholism, or if we know that someone's struggling with drug addiction, or if we know that, Aunt Betty has been known to share things that are inappropriate with the children, then we can certainly prepare ahead of time, for that, and so that we are not caught off guard, and that we've done, a bit of preparedness on our own to deal with the situation so it doesn't catch fire in the moment. And so what I'll say about that is that, if you're asking, so Patrice, how do we prepare? What are some tips that will allow us to prepare? I think one thing I will say is that, we have to just deal with the truth of the situation. And so, like I said just moments ago, so if we know that someone's going to be there, and we're going to encounter someone who's actually going to do something inappropriate, or who has been known to do something inappropriate, or if we're going to encounter someone who's, not the friendliest person at all, then we need to deal with the truth of the matter ahead of time. And to really deal with the truth of what's going on with those persons, and also to deal with the truth as God sees it. And so when we look at that situation, what we will see, how we should try to see it, is that, the truth of the matter is that they're acting inappropriately, or they're, in a situation where they're, having to deal with alcoholism or things of that nature, because of something that quite possibly would awry in their lives a long time ago. And so God sees them as, as his child, and of course God still has the love of God towards them, and that we should keep that in the forefront of our minds, is what I'm trying to say, as we're looking at this person. This is someone who God actually loves. This is someone whose life is went awry a long time ago. And so maybe we can, prepare ourselves ahead of time, and just remind us of how God sees the situation, and what the truth of the matter really is that, and I'm not saying that we allow their behavior to supersede everything that's going on, and that we accept that behavior per se. But what I am suggesting is that we actually see it from God's perspective, and see them from God's perspective as well. So that's one thing when we talk about preparing ourselves. And then the other thing that I would say is to actually be alert, and to remind ourselves that we have a responsibility to be alert in this situation. So again, if Aunt Betty is being inappropriate and she's known to be, then, where the children are concerned, or where someone else is concerned, then, be on guard, and know that we have to be alert to the surroundings and where our children are in respect to her. And that we may have to, to keep that, that situation from happening by just keeping our children around. And so I'll say that. So being alert and preparing to be alert, and also, preparing by seeing people, just by dealing with the truth of the situation. We know they're going to be there. We know that they have an issue. We know that we need a strategy in place to deal with that ahead of time that doesn't allow the situation to become hostile, is what I'm trying to say. But another way of really preparing for the situation is actually to really to make a commitment that we want to be the ones who are going to do right. So we want and by that I'll say that we want to be the ones who want to let the joy continue during the holiday season, the joy to continue at dinner time. So if we can make a commitment that we actually want to be the ones that are going to exhibit self-control, the ones that are going to allow the peace of God to reign in our hearts and in the situation as well. We want to be the ones who are going to show love. So if we can commit to that, to being the ones that we're committed that we're going to be the ones who are going to show kindness in this situation, who are going to show patience in the situation, who are going to to really be an example, I guess I'm trying to say, of the love of Christ here, and to really exhibit, I guess, faith in God that, God is going to help this situation along. So if we can make a commitment, beforehand, that we are going to be, the ones who want to be right before God and right, in the situation as well, then, that'll help take things, a long way as far as preparing, for the situation is concerned. So again, if we can halt, not make any major decisions when we're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, and give God a chance to speak to us, and just pause for the moment, and not make any major moves. And if we can prepare ahead of time by really dealing with the truth of the matter, the truth about the family members, about the family, about what we're going through as a family, and really see things the way God sees them in that situation, from His perspective. And if we can be alert, where Aunt Betty or whomever, Uncle Charles, anybody, I'm sorry, the bad example, but anybody is concerned, Uncle, Henry is concerned, right? If we can be alert in that situation, or if we can actually be really prepared by making the decision, as I just mentioned, about being committed to doing what's right in the situation, then it'll go a long way. But also, if we can really catch up and review what God has said about the peace of God, about allowing the peace of God to reign in our hearts, in this situation, and what we've talked about, previously about, being committed to living at peace with everyone, then, if we can have that fresh in our minds, if we can review, what the Word of God says regarding that, or if we can just allow God to recall to our memories, what He shared with us about other means, about how to have peace in the situation, and really how to trust Him, and have faith in the situation. That says that God sees us, and that He sees the situation at hand, and that that He is going to, that there will be an answer to it. And so that we don't need to really, to pop off and really handle it in the moment. But if we can trust God that, there will be an answer to this, and we just need to hold on and really, make it through and be the ones committed to keeping the joy going this year. And, for each and every year, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So those are some tips as well. But then also, one thing I'll say is that we also can get connected to God if we're not already connected. And so that'll help, it'll make all the other things we've talked about available to us. I said to just really get to know God, and then to learn to trust Him in moments like this. So if we haven't gotten connected with God, then, first things first, I would say, just, invite God in as a guide, and someone who helps us along the way, and someone that we're willing to trust, or learn to trust, I guess I could say. And then all the other things about really seeing things from God's perspective, and really reviewing what He said, and really being able to trust that He's going to be there for us. And then all those other things come into play. But one final thing, just in this strategy I want to offer, is that certainly we should add prayer to the situation, and really asking God, to keep our minds in the situation, and to really give God a chance to really to speak to us about, how we should proceed, and, things to look out for. So I would say, to give God, that opportunity to speak to us, beforehand, if possible. We're talking about preparing, before the event takes place, but even in the moment. And so if we haven't had a chance to prepare, as I just suggested is what I'm trying to say, then, in the moment, we can say a prayer without even, uttering a word. And so what I like to pray is like, God, help me, help me, in this situation. Help me not say the things that I shouldn't say and to not do the things that I shouldn't do. So that's a quick prayer that we can, we don't even have to move our lips to utter in, and just to ask God, to invite God into the moment. God, help me, make the right choice right here, because I know everything in me may want to say, something that I deem appropriate to say, but I know that I should not say, right, in the moment. But God, help me here. And so that's a prayer, a quick one that we can pray and invite God in. But then also I would dare say that we need to pray, afterward in the situation, after we've exited the situation, because we do know that things can fester, and that if we're not careful, then we'll be tempted to pick up the phone and to really get things, right from our perspective, that we felt that we didn't get right in the moment. So even to invite God in, beforehand, and invite God in, in the moment, invite God in afterwards, and so that we don't allow things to fester, and we're not, yielding to the temptation of the thought that we should really, give somebody a piece, a PIEC, as I said, of our mind, even after the situation has ended. So definitely invite God in, again, beforehand, invite God in the moment, invite God in, afterwards, through prayer, by, whatever means. And prayer simply is this: it is really having a conversation with God and listening, for a response, or watching for a response. And so it's nothing more than that. It doesn't have to be anything super, I guess, super spooky, is I would say, or anything super, natural per se. It's talking like we're talking today, in this podcast. And really it's just having an open, honest conversation with God about, the desire, for him in the moment, in the situation, in our lives. And so please, don't feel like it has to be a 15-minute litany of things. No, it's just simply, God, help me, in the moment. Help me see you. Help me be, the things that I would want to be in all of this, family-wise and otherwise. And so it's just as simple as that, is what I'm trying to say. So again, those are strategies, again, to halt, not to make any major decisions when we're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. To really to prepare ahead of time, and to allow God to share, to allow us to see the truth of the matter about what's going on with family members and in certain situations, and to really be committed, as we've talked about, to being the ones who do what's right, and to really take a moment to really to remind ourselves ahead of time of what God has said about his peace, and about his faithfulness to us, and that he sees us, that he sees the situation, and being confident in that, and that there will be an answer to the situation. And also about being vigilant, about being alert to things that we know are likely to happen, and really to have a plan in place, to deal with all of that. And so those are some things, and obviously we didn't repeat the entire list, but if you have a moment, go back and look at the podcast again, and to remind yourself of how to survive Christmas time. This is a Christmas survival guide, and I'm not saying that it's always going to be easy. As I've shared, sometimes the things that God replies to us concerning are not always as easy as we want them to be. But I dare say that God is trustworthy, and he is true to what he says, to be there with us in the moment, and to help guide us along the way. And so the final thing I want to say, as it relates to a strategy, though, it says after we've invited God in, and we pause for a moment to invite God in, and then we've prepared maybe, and then we've also really allowed God to speak to us. Part B of all of that has to be that we have to get up and really do what God says. So and so we know that it's easy for us to talk to someone and we feel like what's being said has gone in one ear and out the other. without any real action. Or maybe, people honestly just forget. But we have to be committed to doing part B of that. And so actually doing what God says, putting what God has said into action in the moment, afterwards, and, and even beforehand, as we've discussed. And so without us putting it into action, then it kind of falls, all of it falls flat. So we have to really be ones who are determined. We are going to put, what we feel God nudging us to do in place in order to make sure that this Christmas is, doesn't fall, into something that we don't want it to be, and it doesn't turn out to be something that's, far less than the most wonderful time of year. And so I wanted to share all those things with you and with us, and because again, God is a lot smarter than you and I, and He's also a very loving God. And I also wanted to share, as we look at Christmas traditions and things like that that may upset us. Just one final thing is that the number one tradition that we're celebrating this time of year is love. And really, giving love on Christmas Day and showing the love of Christ on Christmas Day. And so without that, things kind of do fall apart. And they'll fall flat if we don't remember that is the number one tradition that we're celebrating. And all the other ones are, maybe important, and I'm not trying to indicate that they're not. But again, the number one thing a tradition that we're celebrating is the love of Christ on Christmas Day. So I invite all of us to give the love of Christ on Christmas Day, to give love on Christmas Day, and to hang in there and to take the steps that have been suggested here during the podcast. And we're certainly hoping that we've said something that will be truly helpful in navigating, this Christmas season and this most wonderful time of year that we all can make use of, throughout all of this time. And again, I just want to share that it may be tough to really take the advice that we feel like God is giving us, and I'll be a witness to that. I'll be someone who has to share regarding that. So just recently, I will say that God has really given me some advice, and I don't mind sharing it, but I'll make it quick. But that in a situation where things were not going the way that I wanted them to, and really again, I felt like I wanted to kind of mount a defense, but what God shared with me is that to just simply let it be. And I'm like, God, are we serious? Is that seriously going to be the answer? He was like, no, let it be. Let it be, let it be. Don't try to defend. Don't try to remind people of things that they might need to be reminded of. Don't try to put together another strategy. Simply to let it be. And so that was kind of hard to absorb for a minute, but I actually kind of went back to God on that. And what He's also shared is just what, as the song says, He was like, no, let it be, let it be, let it be. He said, and because there will be an answer, so let it be. And so if we can trust that, God is going to send an answer our way in a given situation to help us along the way, or that God will send an answer, to the other parties involved and to work things out to handle that situation, then if we have that trust in God, then it certainly makes life a lot easier for us to simply let it be if that's what He's saying to us, and to trust always that there will be an answer, that God will come and provide an answer for you and me, and that or either He'll send an answer to correct the situation that has occurred, one way or the other. And so we may not be there to actually witness it, but if we can trust that God is who He says He is, and that He will do exactly what He says, then it makes the holiday season a little bit better, easier to absorb, and it makes us having the response that we should have a lot easier. And so thank you again for joining us at Straight Up Now Tell Me. And we appreciate you so much. And we certainly wish that the love of Christ would come your way always, and especially during this time of year. But before I hop off, I would be remiss if I didn't pause just for a moment to recognize that we certainly understand that here at Straight Up Now Tell Me, that there are persons who are alone during this holiday season. And the persons who may not have, loved ones around to actually celebrate with, and and also persons who may not have the financial resources that they would love to have to make Christmas what they feel that everybody else may be making it, or that what's to make it something that they feel is expected of them. And so what I want to say in the first situation, that if you are without loved ones this holiday season, then please know that God is with you and that you are never alone. And that one thing that Christ has promised us, that he would never leave us, and that he will never leave us high and dry. And so that simply, means that when he says, he'll never forsake us, and that means, he's saying is that he won't leave us high and dry, but that, he's with us always. And so I want you to please keep that in mind and know that you are never alone. There's not a moment that God is not with us. And so to reach for God in that situation is what I'm offering to you. And to also, to do some practical things as well that I would like to suggest is, and maybe, plan something like a friend's Christmas. And so what that simply is where you invite other persons who may be without loved ones or may just be available to come spend, Christmas with you at your home. And you can maybe do a dinner if you would like, or maybe just to invite persons, who they don't have to be family members, but to invite them to come out and meet you, maybe at a restaurant on Christmas Eve, or maybe Christmas Day if there's one open, or maybe, to come out and meet you, even if it's on the front porch, to sit for a while, weather permitting, or either, to come to go to a movie, or whatever the case, but that you put some legwork in. And you may have to be the one that plans all of this. And so, but please, it's certainly worth putting the legwork in, to picking up the phone, or talking to a neighbor or whatever, and really planning this out and doing things that really would make you happy this time of year, or make the entire group happy this time of year. So please consider doing a friend's Christmas. There's a thing called a Friendsgiving that takes place around Thanksgiving. It's the same concept. And again, it may require some work of us, but it's certainly worth the effort. And so you will find that you are not only, being a blessing in your own life, but you are truly being a blessing in someone else's life as well. But the other thing that I wanted to share before we pop off the podcast on today, is that if you find yourself where you don't have the resources financially that you are hoping to have during this holiday season, and you're feeling, that, you may be wondering what are some things that you can do. What I would like to share as well is that you can do things with the kids if you have kids around, so like a scavenger hunt throughout the house. And so even in that moment, you can hide snowflakes, you can hide pictures of loved ones, throughout the house, and make a game of it Christmas morning with the kids going to find all of these things. And you can also do a scavenger hunt outside if the neighborhood will allow and if time will allow. And so again, the number one tradition that we're sharing this Christmas season is love. And kids spell love T-I-M-E, time spent. And so if you can spend some time just doing, like I said, a scavenger hunt, or maybe just doing a Christmas walk, whatever, just get creative with it. Or maybe even just, coming up with a game whereby the kids, and challenging the kids about who can make the best hot dog out of a reindeer, maybe pretzel sticks, or maybe ketchup and mustard, and just making a game out of that. You'll be surprised how far that might go with really being exciting for younger kids and maybe even older kids. But again, if we can put our creative imaginations together and really figure out ways to really make Christmas really festive, then we can get by, and it'll go a long way. But again, certainly we invite God in, and hey, if there's snow, hey, snowman contest, hey, or either snow angel contest, who can make the best snow angel. And if you have access to a cell phone, one other thing that I would like to say is that maybe taking pictures throughout the day and posting them online of of the family, or the kids having a great moment, time throughout the day, is a way of really capturing the moment and making a recording of all of that, or even just having the kids write down their favorite moments throughout this time. And so again, creativity goes a long way, and certainly I don't have all of the answers here, but God does. And so that goes back to what we were sharing earlier about inviting God in and to the situation and into our decision making, and just letting him speak to us and introducing us, and allow him to introduce to us ways to really be festive and have a great Christmas, and to really do the number one tradition again, which is love. And so one other thing I'll jump back and say regarding the Friends Christmas, though, is that my brother in Baltimore has done a wonderful job of making this happen. And so for years, he's opened his home up to persons who may have been estranged from their family members, and really not invited home for whatever reason, and not welcomed home for whatever reason. But he's opened his home up to those persons and really given them a place that they know that they can count on, most of all, where they can spend Christmas with friends, with persons who are loving towards them, and really where they can look forward to having a great time at Christmas time. And so I wanted to share that, because it doesn't take a lot. It takes a loving heart and a meal if you can afford it, or maybe even a potluck, or maybe just time spent where people can come by and really know that they're welcome, that they're loved, and that even if they cannot go home because of a situation that is happening in their lives, or because of the approval of their parents regarding something that they're going through. Please know that my brother has done this successfully, for decades, for at least the last 2 decades, and I've been able to witness that and the difference that it's made in people's lives around him, and just the fact that people know that they have a space where they can come and also be included. Along those lines. And so even if it's a someone who's come through foster care, who doesn't have a family that they know of, that they can spend, have these traditions with, then they can actually, still have a Friendsgiving, or be invited to a Friendsgiving that we have, and know that they have a place that they can fit in as well and be loved. And so I just wanted to share that with you guys. Again, that, just as an example of someone who's shown the love of Christ, and love towards the community successfully, for years. And trust me, it's warmed my heart. I've learned from watching this that, that A, is possible, and B, that I've learned the difference that it's made in people's lives around him. And so I've been able to take part, during some holidays. But again, it is something to see. It's something that I would encourage each and every one of us to do if we're able, and if we have the time and the space. So thank you again, and Merry Christmas to you all, and just have a wonderful holiday season, however you decide to celebrate. But most of all, don't do it without God's help, because life with God, as I like to say, is certainly a lot better than life without Him. So thank you again, and thank you for joining Straight Up Now Tell Me, Christian conversation that's straight without a chaser.